Now, we shift gears to something fast, focused, and full of energy lightning talks. This segment is all about sharp insights and real world experiences. Each speaker brings one idea, one lesson, or one story from their work in technology and education. We would like to invite our first speaker for today.
My request Ms. Ambika J, Director, Artificial Intelligence, Finastra, working on enterprise scale AI systems to get started with our lightning talks for the day. May we have a huge round of applause for Ambika.
Is it open? Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. And we've all been experiencing such inspiring sessions. Before I begin, yeah. So before I begin, I just want to recall today I heard about collective leadership and shared responsibility. And I'm really thankful for being here and having this opportunity to be part of InvokED. Right, so before today, I'll be talking about GenAI solutions. Yeah. Right. So Finastra is financial we provide financial technological solutions. In that, we have lending, trade, treasury, then we have banking solutions, corporate and retail banking solutions. So we have wide range of products, and at the same time, we have clients who represent top 50 of the top 50, top 45 clients are part of Finastra. So now, while we have this wide range of clients, we also have solutions that really delight them, right? So customer delight is one thing, security is another, accuracy and quality are all the things that we look at. Now, to begin with, there was a scenario where one of our HR who came to us and then said, we want to roll out these policies, and we want to have a tech solution, right? If it was a traditional way, what we would do, we would say, okay, I can build this for you with the requirement analysis and all of that, gather all of that. Then you have your entire flow. So we'll say about 6 months. We take 6 months for you to provide a solution, right? And then the Gen AI era, where what we do is we'll say, okay, we can build this with Gen AI, but again, there's some more process that is required. And because you're not tech savvy, we'll have to build the solutions for you, right? So again, couple of weeks to a month, definitely to roll out that solution. But the requirement was they wanted it yesterday, right? So whenever they're rolling out something, the solution they wanted always yesterday, right? So any partner who came to us with any solution that they always wanted something a day before. So we thought, how do we solve this problem? So we came up with a platform where now anybody from such services like who are not tech savvy and they want to have a solution, they can come to this platform that we built, and they can just upload the files that they have, and then they can have visualizations by themselves. They don't even have to depend on anyone, and they have the visualizations, right? So today, in case if there's someone, they don't reach out to someone, but just use this platform and build the solutions for themselves, create the dashboards, executive summaries of whatever they want within no time. So we went from the traditional way to Gen AI way to a platform way, right? And that has helped in a big way. It's just not for one particular partner, but across our organization, be it legal, be it HR, or anyone. Similarly, we have solutions for our tech developers, and then we also have for our customer support, right? So this is one thing which is internally that we look at. And there's one more scenario where our clients would want to train on the products that you're using. So in that scenario, we would provide them all the knowledge articles, and they would train themselves, and then there were challenges with respect to understanding that, or they had some questions and dependencies. So then we came up with a solution where we provided a conversational way of answering these questions, right? So usually we have it as chatbots, but here we went a step ahead, and then we have a way that it can be a little more intuitive, reducing hallucination, self-learning, and things like that, right? And also, this is multimodal and multi-model in the sense, based on the need, it could change accordingly. So with this, what happened? The way they trained themselves were a little faster. There were no dependencies for any of these solutions. And this is something that we have done end-to-end, right? Because we did a lot of pilots, and there are certain learnings and failures that happen. And there are hundreds of research that we did even before coming to this point, and we kept it very simple. Now we can implement this for any project that we want. So for this particular product, we already have a client. They are using this, and that's a success story that we have. It took time. It took time for us to have it something on production. It takes time. That was a big learning. So, so like that is another example that we had. So while we were building the solution, what we saw was the leaders, they want the solution like in a week or two. Yeah, that is what we all expect from GenAI, but there are certain realities, right? Like, for example, if you want to have it in production, you need to have it guarded, you have your guardrails, you have your responsible AI, it needs to be transparent, it needs to have the CISO team approvals, your DevOps coordinating with you, and then there are certain things that happen from your dev environment to QA to UAT to the production. So I have seen all of this while we implement, and the reality is it takes time. Probably the core solution, we built it in 2 weeks, but to get to this product with all these moving parts and such a dynamic way of, there's so many models that comes every other day, right? So you'll have to keep it up with that and all of that. It took time, and there was a big learning for us. So that is something that I could just mention over here. But at the same time, it is promising, and there are challenges and there are learning. So probably like any other new technology, GenAI is also evolving, and that is where we see, though there are failures, there is something more promising as well. So apart from my day job, I also volunteer. I represent IEEE Computer Society Bangalore chapter. Here I drive an initiative called Girl Gigs, right? So this idea came about by thinking, how do we really empower young students and industry folks? From that, we said just an regular tech talks would not help, so how do we do it differently? So right now, from where it started to today, if you see, in 2025, we did something much more. The scope is beyond, earlier it was only in Karnataka. It was only within colleges. Now, last year, 2024, it was across Karnataka. This year, we did it across South India. And what we did differently was, we are getting use cases from industry, and then we ask them to solve, right? So when we ask them to solve, it's not 24 hours hackathon. What we see is, when we do these 24 hours hackathon, it is one day, and then it is left at that, right? It is not taken to the next level. So we want these students to think deeper. So we have come up with this program where we have workshops, 3 weeks of design thinking. Literally, they understand the problem statement and they solve that, right? And then after the 3 weeks, they build a week's prototype, and then they come up with a solution. So last year, this led to a lot of other things. For example, they had an opportunity to come and present to our corporate, that is to our CXOs, and they were totally impressed with the way they were groomed and the way they were presenting and the way they have learned the way to solve a problem, right? So that has led to job opportunities within our company and also visibility. And apart from that, this year what we did is we made a small change in this, and we said, how can each one of them who are there as part of this be an entrepreneur or can have their own ideas to a startup level, right? And we saw that, so that is one of the things that we said, that we ourselves will come together and then help them to create the startup. So three of us, we said we will give them an initial funding, and then we'll start helping them. And we saw one team who just came up and presented their idea. So that is one of the impact that we created. And so this is how we are trying to help students. And while the other thing that I would like to mention is we also provided use cases for the students. So there's two use cases that we provided this year. One was where we wanted the students to have heterogeneous agents where they can orchestrate the entire thing and then present. That was one of the use cases. The other use cases was financial literacy, right, where they can have conversational QAs and find and implement this. So while we give these use cases from industry, there is a way that they get certain information from the industry or folks, and they also had mentors who could mentor them, and the quality at which they presented was really amazing, right? So I think these are the two use cases that I just wanted to present today, and yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ambika, for the insightful presentation on Finastra and also talking about the impactful work that you and your team is doing. Next up, I invite Ms. Karishma Galani, co-lead at PraDigi Innovation Center, Pratham International, driving digital innovation in education. May we have a huge round of applause for Ms. Karishma, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Karishma Galani. It's lovely to meet you all. I'm part of Pratham International. Most of you might know this as Pratham Education Foundation. I lead, and my team leads PraDigi Innovation Center, which is a research and development center that builds AI and ML products across programs. I will get started with, actually, before I start, I'm very excited to be here only because after the panel, there are certain things that were highlighted, such as multilingual, such as teacher support, that I wanted to speak to today. I'm going to walk you through one product in particular. This is something that we've been building for the last 4 years. So it is called PraDigi. PraDigi, as many of you must have already kind of heard a lot of companies come out with, or education companies come out with, is a reading assessment app. It essentially hears a student read a particular piece of text, and it allows the teacher to be able to understand their reading fluency. It's very interesting in the sense of trying to address the foundational literacy and numeracy challenge. We've been developing this for the last 4 years. I will tell you what makes this particular one interesting. We actually noticed that when you use these assessment apps on the field, there are particularly unique challenges on the ground that we wanted to address, such as also mentioned in the panel that we just heard, essentially understanding accent dialects and pronunciation. These are some issues that we see on the field quite often. And so instead of trying to jump in and build a solution immediately, the team at PraDigi took a step back and tried to understand why this was happening with LLM models today. And so we actually built something called the ReadNet dataset. It is one of the largest Hindi audio children's speech data sets that exist today. It actually addresses 1,200 hours worth of children's audio's speech. We've tried to collect it across every state in India, trying to address various pronunciation dialects as well. Right now, it's built in Hindi and Marathi, and we are continuing that process for other languages as well. It targets about 100,000 students, and this data set essentially is the foundation before we can build any products on top. So when we actually talk about PraDigi, PraDigi is one example or one product that we built on top of this data set. It works offline because we've done it this way. It never leaves the teacher's phone, and it kind of stays on device and allows for teachers not to just understand someone's fluency or a child's fluency level, but also to be able to derive further insights from that. I'm going to talk a little bit about one example of where we've used it. How many of you have heard of teaching at the right level? Awesome, a few of you. So for the ones I haven't, I'm just going to quickly talk about it. Teaching at the Right Level is a about 20-year intervention that Pratham founded and created. It's a 30-day intervention in foundational literacy and numeracy that takes place in grades 3 to 5. And essentially, this is something that happens fully offline. And when a Pratham staff member actually enables it, the learning outcome after that 30-day intervention is about 40%. This learning outcome jump, which is quite massive for a 30-day intervention, falls down to about 20s when a government teacher actually administers this assessment. This is data that we've known for multiple years now, and largely what we attribute this to is multiple things, but I think one of them is largely like training, for example, or being able to actually have multiple touch points, which we maybe aren't able to have with government teachers. So before we started a lot of this technological work, we tried to ask the question, is there technology that could actually help us bridge that gap? And so that's kind of when PraDigi, as an assessment app, kind of came into the picture for teaching at the right level. It's one of the first places that we decided to pilot this particular app. And for many of you who also don't know, Teaching at the Right Level has about a 60 million student reach across all of India as well as 20 other countries. So it takes place in every language across the world. And so trying to create a technological companion to this entire program is a pretty hefty undertaking, and so we wanted to make sure we were doing this the right way. Initially, we actually started with PraDigi. It is something that we integrated in the offline program, so essentially watching facilitators take the assessment as opposed to offline, actually take it on the app. And to see how it happens and what is that behavioral change. The brief to this talk was also to talk about some of the challenges. And one of the biggest challenges that we were dealing with at the time was around behavioral shifts. How do you get a large population of facilitators who are dealing with extreme challenges, not even education related sometimes. It's classroom management related. It's trying to deal with how to manage a student-teacher ratio of 1:60, in some cases 1:100. It's like really just-in-time components that we're dealing with. And so how do you, in this context, introduce technology and then also make sure it's actually useful and parallelly helping increase learning outcomes? These were some of the challenges that we're dealing with. So as opposed to jumping into a program of teaching at the right level with a tech solution in mind, we actually took a lot of folks on our team, both part of the tech team, as well as the measurement team, as well as the content team on the ground to see what happens when I take one intervention on the ground, and does it help that process? So watching PraDigi in that first boot camp, which we ran with about 14 learning camps or 14 schools around India, was very interesting because the first sort of feedback was pushback, as mostly is the case with technology. And to then, over the course of the 30 days, watch how that shifts was really interesting. And we're now in our third boot camp of piloting not just PraDigi, but additions to PraDigi, which I will talk about a little bit as well. But that was kind of the challenge that we were dealing with. Over time, we've hit about I think 70 facilitators, so 70 schools around India and about 3,500 students with this particular pilot. It has built on top of PraDigi because what the assessment has basically let us do is essentially go deeper. So when I place a student at, let's say, a word level, which means that a student is able to read a word, how do you actually derive further insights from that? From our initial sort of data insights, what we've derived is that when a student is at a word level, there are actually two ways to be at a word level. In one particular way, and when you say a word in a particular style, that actually means that your intervention or your progression would be slightly different than if you were student A, which is at a slightly different sort of way of pronouncing a word. Because PraDigi is able to actually capture the student data, we're able to now differentiate between the two and actually highlight that for the teacher in the form of an intelligent nudge, which is essentially the second component, where you're actually able to really quickly, just in time, be able to highlight, as an app, I now know your classroom composition, I know your attendance, I understand where the student's at with this particular assessment, and now I can not just nudge you with a basic format of TAL, but actually go deeper and really personalize it to that facilitator and not inundate them with excessive information, but just-in-time information that we as a Teaching at the Right Level program that have been running it for about 20 years have the ability to now do. This nudge essentially then leads us to the second component, which is a voice bot. Which we also heard in the panel prior. But essentially, this voice bot now has multiple streams of data come in. It's not just talking as a regular LLM. It's actually talking from knowing about that facilitator and drawing from that particular insight. So in Teaching at the Right Level, students are grouped. This is a very important part of the program. And so when students are grouped, they are sometimes grouped on level, but as I previously mentioned, sometimes classroom management issues show up, and so groups get moved. And groups can be heavily linked to the learning outcome at the end of it. And so how do you actually track that? And then also intervene at the right times to be able to say, hey, can you try changing your groups today? Because given the data that we see over the course of multiple years, for example, I can tell and predict that these groups could actually be better and meet better learning outcomes when we change them at this particular day and time of the camp. And that's something that a teacher can now have a conversation with the voice bot. So the voice bot acts as a medium or a tool, but the data that it pulls from is actually where the benefit is at in this case. And so we refer to this as a decision intelligence model. It hasn't necessarily launched yet. It's been in very much a pilot stage within, but the idea of all of this, both Padhai and this version of Teaching at the Right Level, is to build it as a digital public good. And so it's very much something that we're doing to open it up to everybody so that we can actually meet teachers, as many teachers as possible, just in time. Essentially, I'm gonna pause there. I have a little bit more to say, but I think I'm gonna stop here because I know this is a lot. So thank you so much. Please come out and reach out to me. And if in case you are curious about this, I'd be happy to walk you through it, give you a demo. Shout out to Shiksha Lokham, who's put this together. They've been lovely. So thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was really wonderful. We would now like to invite Ms. Karishma Shanghvi, Director at Shikha Academy, focused on leadership development and learning design. May we have a round of applause, please?
This one, no? Yes. Move na back. Hi, good morning, everyone. Just waiting for the presentation. Hi, my name is Karishma Shanghvi. I am the director and founder at Shikha Academy and the Shikha Institute of Education. Recently, we founded a technology company within a K-12 school called Shikha Labs. So talk more about what we do at Shikha Labs. So this is an interesting perspective on the role of technology on human progress. You know, we say there have been these massive leaps in human progress across history. And a lot of them have come with these technologies that enable a lowering of extraneous cognitive load. Excuse the terminologies, it's from the learning science perspective, but any grunt work, anything that is sort of difficult and boring to sort of do, which we can delegate to technology, has allowed the mind, the human mind, to become more free, emptied out space in the mind for us to take these giant leaps in human progress. So as we can see that when we started writing, because we could download our thoughts on paper, we had more space in our mind. The same thing with the printing press and PCs and the internet. And I would argue this is also the impact that AI is going to have. AI will not just help us do our normal work better, but it will help us accelerate all other fields of human progress, because now we can just do things so much faster and so much more productively. Imagine the time that we can do other innovative things. This is a very important point with technology. I also want to make another statement that technology has been, in education especially, has been said that, oh, it's, we fixed education. One silver bullet has come and now we don't need teachers anymore. This happened multiple times in our history. It's happened with the radio. It happened again with the TV. Everyone said, "Arey, we've got TVs and radios, now we don't need schools anymore." Right? It happened again with MOOCs, with Coursera and the EDX and all of these online platforms. Has anything changed really? No. This is because technology is not the silver bullet, and no technologies have replaced the actual teachers yet. So given this, the reason why this is because education is not content delivery. It is not optimizing for content delivery. Education is guided, social, cognitive development, which means that there is merit in having a classroom, having a teacher as a facilitator, having a peer group of students who are learning together. That is where real, deep, efficient learning actually happens. So we want to optimize for this. We don't want to optimize for content delivery. What are we? So Shikha is a very interesting model. It started as a K-12 IGCSE Cambridge board school, exclusively serving low-income slum children in Mumbai. It was an experiment. We said, let's try, right? Let's see what sort of happens if we give these kids the best possible education that our country has to offer. As part of that, we started a research and development institute where we publish research papers. We are looking at the learning sciences from an Indian and a global South perspective. This is a very big gap that we don't do enough educational research in the global South. A lot of all our learnings come from the West. So we wanted to fill this gap. And the third thing is we started an edtech company within the school. Within the school, because we can see the problems that our teachers are facing in the classrooms every day, and build apps that would solve exactly those problems. So we don't start with an idea, we start with what is the problem and how can we solve it. Everyone knows design thinking is a very famous sort of framework of how we create products. But because we have all of these departments within the same building, literally, within the same campus, design thinking just happens like rapidly within the school. So we start with empathizing with the teachers. We literally mapped their entire journey in a day. What do they do? Specifically, day from minute to minute to minute. What is it that a teacher does? Where are those pain points? Where is the teacher struggling? Where is she doing grunt work that maybe is not required for her to be doing? And then then we said, parallelly, understand the capabilities of AI. AI is not a silver bullet, it cannot solve all problems. There are some capabilities of AI that we can harness, and there are some things that AI is not the right solution for. So we have to be careful to understand the difference between these two. The third thing is, okay, now we have the problems, now we understand the capabilities of AI, let's put them together. With these capabilities, solve these problems. And the last one, test, refine, iterate, constantly. So we know that it works. So when we mapped the teacher's journey, an ideal, our best teachers, this is what they did. They started with research. If I'm given a topic to teach as a teacher, I will build my own knowledge about the topic. I will think of, what are some interesting pedagogies, some interesting techniques for me to use to be able to teach this particular topic. I will then plan and create a year plan, a unit plan, and then a lesson plan. I'll think of what resources I need to create, what teacher learning materials I need to have. Then I will teach it. And while I'm teaching it, I may use, I may have struggles in the classroom in terms of how my class is going. And the last is I want to reflect. I want to assess and analyze what have my kids done? How did I do in my class? Could I have become a better teacher? You have to have that reflection phase. And then you start the process once more. So we mapped out exactly what a teacher does. Do you all agree? Most of you all have seen teachers or are teachers. Is this generally the process that you follow? Yeah? Okay. So now let's map AI. In education, what are the various roles that AI can take? AI can be a knowledge disseminator. AI can be for planning, AI can be used for feedback, for coaching, creating, brainstorming, analysis, simulations. It's like this list is not the final list. We still haven't explored what all AI can do, but this is a good starting point. But look at the diversity of roles that AI can play. These are the affordances, what AI affords us. Now let's map these two together. And that's when we created Sakhi. Sakhi is a teacher's best friend. She is there to support the teacher at every point of her journey, figuring out where all she is struggling with and helping her deal with those issues. It's designed for teachers, by teachers, through this design thinking process. What all does Sakhi do? So for every step in the teacher's journey, there is an app to support her. So when she starts doing research, she interacts with a subject matter expert. If she's doing research in biology, she's talking to a professor of biology. If she's interacting with, talking about history, she's talking to a professor of history. And she has a conversation to build her own knowledge base, subject matter knowledge base, before she teaches something. Then she goes to a pedagogy expert and says, okay, now I know what to teach. How do I teach it? What are some interesting, different, student-centered pedagogies that I could use? Then she goes and starts to plan and create. The first thing, the thing that most of our teachers struggle with, is creating really high-quality learning goals, if at all they do them. So this creates for the teacher knowledge, skill, and attitude-based learning goals, not just what the child should know, but what the child should be able to do and how the child should be able to think. Then there's a unit plan generator, a lesson plan generator, an assessment generator. All of these three are just in a workflow. So the same topic, you just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that. And then the last one is a classroom simulator. So the best teachers can visualize what their class is going to be. In that 1 hour that they're teaching, they know, okay, this will happen, then this will happen, this will happen. Best teachers also rehearse. They rehearse in front of a mirror, in front of their peers, they practice that particular class, right? This is an AI environment which allows you to pick students in your class of different personalities and then teach to them. And all the students are AI bots. And you can teach without any judgment, you can make mistakes, you can try again, right? So over time, as you practice, because teaching is a skill, right? The more you practice, the better you will become at it. Then when you are teaching, there are multiple subject and pedagogy specific apps that we'll discuss a bit later. At the end, you have a student assessment checker. The teacher takes photos of the student assessments, uploads them, and the assessments get marked. We've actually built this, it works really well. The student performance analyzer, all the marks directly go to a dashboard. And the dashboard uses AI to give it interesting insights. The last one, which is my favorite, is a teacher instructional coach. We know coaching for teachers, where the coach sits in the classroom with the teacher and gives the teacher feedback after the class. Is a very, very well-proven way to increase teacher performance, but it's not scalable at all. So this is a way for us to take an AI bot where the teacher records her class on her own phone, uploads it to the app, and the AI gives her personalized, specific feedback with evidence from her own voice about what she did really well and what she could work on. And then the AI and the teacher have a conversation about the feedback, and they co-create a plan for the next class. That in my next class, I want to work on these aspects of my teaching. So this is the coach. Here are some sort of, you can't probably see it from this distance, but some screenshots. So we told Sakhi that we want to teach a physical features of India geography class from the CBSE 9 standard curriculum. And this is the entire flow of all these apps towards the end. So Sakhi is one of multiple projects that we're working on. Some other things that we have piloted within the school and now are piloting in many more places is an AI literacy curriculum for middle school kids. Starting grade 7 is when they start doing this. A student portfolio. So we know that student portfolios are a really good way of creating like assessments. There's an AI system where the student uploads a portfolio and the AI gives feedback on the child's 21st century skills with evidence from the portfolio. There's a young, enthusiastic, teachable agent. So the child, instead of writing a final exam, teaches an AI bot that is younger than the child the content. So now, and the transcript is then judged, and that the marks for the child are based on the transcript of their conversation. It's a much more fun way of doing an assessment than a boring written exam. There's a sandbox platform. So we want to empower teachers and students to build their own apps. So they can just log into this platform and build an app. And the app is ready. They prompt it, and the app is ready. They can use it in literally 10 minutes. And there's a lot of research that goes into this. So we've published a lot of papers in AI, in education. So it's been a very busy, busy time. Some takeaways that, from this journey that we've had on building AI is always look at the longer term repercussions of AI use for learning. If you are going to replace something to, replace some activity to make it more scalable or to make it faster, is it harming the child's learning? Because there is something called a productive struggle. You want the child to actually deeply learn something by struggling with it. If you're going to spoon feed the child with AI, what is the long-term repercussion on the child's learning? It's a very important thing to think about. Of course, be responsible. Do not make a bad problem worse by throwing tech onto it. The second thing is, don't use metrics like, okay, the student was engaged. Most students, when you put a screen in front of their face, they're going to be engaged. That doesn't say anything about the quality of your product, right? So have strong learning outcome-based metrics. Is my child learning better than they did earlier? It is simple to do that. We should start doing that more. Listen to educators. We learn so much from our teachers. We know what works and doesn't work because our teachers tell us this. So we have to have an open mind, keep learning, be willing to change your mind, and do not fall into the sunk cost fallacy. Oh, I've built this for 2 years. Should I just stop building it? I wasted 2 years. This is called a sunk cost fallacy. So I'll end there. Thank you so much for listening.
Next up, I invite Mr. Karthik Dhar, CTO at Project Echo, an organization that's enabling large-scale knowledge sharing, for his presentation. Over to you, Mr. Karthik.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be here at this event. Thank you for Shiksha Lokam for inviting me here. My name is Karthik, and I represent an organization called Project Echo. We are mostly known for our work in the healthcare space, but education is something which we have been expanding to recently. AI is also something we are very new to. We are experimenting here. We are learning as we go along. So I'd like to talk a little bit about our journey, our experiences over building technology over the last few years, and what we've learned along the way, and what we are trying to do now as we are entering this new unknown world of AI. So I'll share some background on how this whole thing started. So Project Echo started about 23 years ago. Our founder was a doctor in the southwestern United States, a liver specialist. And his goal was to build the capacity of every frontline medical professional in his state so that they could all be operating at their full potential. And he did this through what we call as the Echo model, which is essentially creating communities of practice where we have a hub, which is usually experts. It could be doctors, it could be nurses, etc. And then you have a community of participants, and this learning community together basically learns from each other. Experts teach the learners, learners learn from experts, learners learn from each other as well. And that's this sort of idea we call all teach and all learn. So the way it works is we have participants who present real-world cases. In the medical field, it could be medical cases where, if I'm a doctor, a patient comes to my clinic, and I will basically present this problem to the group. And it's about collaborative problem solving. How do we enable people to share their own experiences, learn from each other, instead of just giving a lecture on how to treat this patient? So that was the idea which Dr. Arora had, and then he created this model. So participants ask questions, this multidisciplinary expert team provides recommendations, people learn from each other, they keep discussing again and again and again, and it's about guided practice over a long period of time instead of just giving the answer very quickly, which I think is resonates pretty well even in the case of education, also what we are seeing with AI. It's not just about giving answers, it's about how do we encourage learning, how do we encourage people to come up with the answer themselves. And this is what we call the Echo model. And through this repetition over time, the community is benefited, right? So we do not directly intervene in the community. We aim to upskill the frontline workers, and it started in health, of course, so that they can go and do the impact in their community. So it's a distributed model. This is what our first ECHO program looked like back 23 years ago. It was basically a Zoom call kind of thing. This is before Zoom even existed. So you can see an expert team in the center, and then you had these participants joining remotely. Of course, now we do video conferencing all the time, right? So for 20 years, we were just doing Zoom calls, and we spread this model to other partners, and we would tie up with universities and ministries and other domains. Then gradually realized that, okay, this started in health, but wherever there is a knowledge gap, that we need guided mentoring. This model could be adopted in education also for upskilling of school teachers, educators, and then in agriculture and other domains. So we've expanded not just in healthcare. But essentially, we realize that it's not just about doing the same thing again and again and again. Going back to the principles of societal thinking, we're not just trying to take what works and then replicate that 100 times, but instead look at what works at scale. So we were asking this question about 5-7 years or so back when we started this digital journey, which is, how do we take this model and scale this to impact 1 billion people? Because that was the mission that we had. But the question perhaps was slightly different that we should have been asking, which was, instead of how do we scale this movement and this learning model, how do we enable the frontline workers to be able to scale their impact? And how can we empower them so that they are the ones who are actually benefiting? So essentially, as the previous speaker alluded to, design thinking, right? Keep your users at the center, see how we can empower them, build their agency to deliver impact, and not thinking about how can you try to impact 1 billion people, because we cannot do it on our own. And that's the realization that we got to. And we learned from our partners at Societal Thinking, the X-Step Foundation, of course, in terms of how do you leverage these ideas of building societal scalable systems. For example, building public goods using open source technologies. So all of our code base is open source. We use open source entirely across our technology stack, making sure that we are catalyzing interactions across the network. So which is very keen to us, because ECHO is all about building communities of practice. So instead of us trying to solve problems, how do we encourage people to interact with each other and then together come up with these solutions? Thirdly, how do we provide the agency or the access back to our end users so that we are not trying to solve problems for people, but they can come up with the solution themselves? And lastly, how do we inspire co-creation? Because we work in a diverse ecosystem, everyone is trying to solve various problems, but a lot of times the solution does not need to be reinvented and people can find the solution from each other. So how do we enable this kind of co-creation in a diverse ecosystem, provide agency, do this at scale, and do this in a manner which is open and interoperable? And at the end goal is basically distributing the ability to solve problems rather than distributing the solution itself. And that is where we came up with the creation of what we call as the iEcho digital platform, which works in 25 different languages. So this is a scalable platform which works across the world. We work in health, we work in education, in agriculture, in climate. We are expanding into other domains now as well. We have partnerships in over 70 countries and participants from every single country in the world. And the end goal of building this infrastructure in this learning model is that we create what we call as a trusted human network to empower frontline workers throughout the world so that we can scale impact and transform learning outcomes and do this at massive scale. But the key thing for us is technology is only the enabler. Technology is not the final solution. We firmly believe that the end goal is to empower our community members, give them the tools to collaborate, share with each other, and trust that they will figure out the solution. We are not here to, of course, provide solutions. And when we started this digital journey, we basically had 4 main objectives in mind. The first was, how do you eliminate barriers to participation, making it far easier for participants to join? So for example, language is a barrier. So how do we make sure that our app works in all the different languages around the world? Access to internet is a barrier. So how do we make sure it works even in the remotest areas with low tech connectivity on low-end Android devices and not just on fancy computers? So how do we eliminate barriers to entry? How do we accelerate adoption so that it's easier to get started with running programs, to tie up with organizations, to basically get started with the movement so that it's less bureaucratic? How do we make it more automated so that we are leveraging technology to track data automatically, to automate a lot of the manual processes, because this, of course, is a resource constrained world. So how do we leverage technology to make things faster? And most critically for us is how do we build community? So the end goal, again, is use technology to make more human connection instead of the technology taking away from the human connections, which is unfortunately what we end up seeing in a lot of cases where there is technology intervention, is that community takes a back seat, right? So that is something which we have been very mindful of in our digital journey, is that last point of building community is most critical. And the idea here is to create a platform which is the sort of digital infrastructure which powers this eco movement. On top of this digital infrastructure is where the magic really happens, is where we have our partners. These are the hub teams, institutions, NGOs, universities, governments around the world. They share, they discover new areas of collaboration, they connect with each other, they invite their own networks. And together, this network, by interacting with each other and learning from each other, is what essentially creates impact and scales up to the community. So we are able to achieve a lot just by focusing very closely on that shared digital infrastructure and then opening it up to the ecosystem. And through the power, of course, of the internet and of interoperable systems, we are able to reach 1 billion people indirectly. This is a very interesting network we can see right now as we speak. This is a real-time dashboard which shows where all interactions are happening around the world. These red dots are partner institutions or the hubs. The teal are the participants, the spoke sites, and these white lines are basically wherever interactions are happening. And you can see in real time, we have close to 5,000 active learning programs running in different parts of the world. And a lot of it is within each country, a lot of it is global also, where we have experts in one country and learners in another country, bridging barriers of language, bridging barriers of geography, so that the right knowledge can be available at the right place at the right time, which is what our mission is all about. So AI is something which we are very new to, and we started this journey about a year or so back, which is how do we take this human network we have, how do we leverage AI on top of it, and what are the use cases which we could come up with. And in terms of the principles, we wanted to be very clear in terms of why we are doing this. Because of course AI, and when I say AI, I mean large language models, AI, agents, etc. It is very powerful technology. We all know that. Of course, there's a lot of unintended consequence which could happen as a side effect of it. But the key thing for us is, number one, it has to be privacy first. We have to respect. And when we say privacy, we mean the ethics around it, who gets to control the data, what are the the guardrails we're putting into the system, how do we prevent bias into the system, essentially creating a trust and safety architecture which will basically make sure that all the interactions that are going on go through this sort of trust filtration, and then only is it sort of opened up to various sorts of AI systems. How do we empower human connections even more? Very important, because a lot of times we can ask ChatGPT the answer, but that basically removes human-to-human connection. And I believe it was the previous speaker who was talking about how technology has never been able to replace the teacher, right? So how do we make sure that technology, in this case generative AI, is not replacing human-to-human connection, but we can actually make it more augmented. So for example, rather than in the case of, let's say we have programs on early childhood education. Instead of solving the problem of the teacher, we summarize it, we encourage them to connect with experts, share their problem in their forums, discuss with them, and also provide some relevant guidance along the way. Because we're not about just solving problems and coming up with solutions, but connecting them, creating communities of practice where people will share and discuss, because that's where it becomes a lifelong learning and not just a one-off, trying to get an answer to a question. How do we make it open and inclusive by design so that AI is not a bottleneck, it doesn't end up creating more silos, and also doesn't further widen the gap, the knowledge gap which already exists. So how do we leverage open source technologies, making sure that we're not dependent on proprietary language models, which are essentially a black box where we don't know what the training data is, we're not sure what are the guardrails involved in it. So trying to make sure all that we do is open and inclusive by design. And lastly, possibly most importantly, is what are we really solving? I think taking a step back and really asking yourself, what is the problem that the school teacher is really facing? What are the problems that the child in the classroom is really facing? And then say, okay, how do we use AI to solve their problem? Instead of looking at it from the technology standpoint, which is, okay, we have this powerful technology, now let's go try to find a solution for it. I think sometimes we end up becoming so enamored with the power of the technology that we sort of forget like what we're really here to do. So that's it from my side. Thank you so much for listening. And I'm around here if you would like to connect more about the work that we do. And anyone who's interested in building communities of practice, doing this at scale for capacity building programs, please do connect with us. Thank you very much.